Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Debbie from NDIS Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Similar to a recent podcast we did that has got actually nothing to do with SDA and NDIS, the Bali developments, we are revisiting that. I've got guest speakers, Rob and Ian, with me again. Hi, guys.
Hi, Debbie. Hi, Ian. Hiya. Good morning.
Hi. The reason we're doing another episode on Bali is because Rob, Ian and myself were actually over there last week to visit the guys from GNet. If you remember, Mark was actually on the podcast that we did a couple of months back, I think, wasn't it now?
Yes, almost. 6 to 8 weeks, probably. Definitely more than 6 to 8. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were invited to go over and have a look at projects, meet the team, find out more about them, because they do wish us to come on board as a channel manager. And I just want to add that obviously this is not going to be NDIS Property Australia, but our parent company, Build New Homes. So Rob actually was over there on holiday, and we thought that was a perfect time to pop over while he was there and have a quick look. So Ian and I flew over for a very short visit, just 3 nights. We got back a week ago, and we have had a very interesting time. We all went in, with a level of skepticism, wanting to really find out more about these people, who they were, who GNet was, and was this for real? Because, everything we're hearing, the returns are they unrealistic? They seem crazy good. So we just want to talk about what happened over there, what we learned, and give you our feedback from the ground. So I might hand it over to you, Ian, to, I guess, give us your first impressions.
Well, obviously, we've been looking at this since May, and we've seen quite a few things change. But there's one thing looking at it online from the perspective of looking at it from our client's point of view, and then getting over there and actually meeting the people. So having gone over there, they were as well organized and they were the perfect hosts. And apparently the way we were treated is the way they treat the investors that are coming over to see the various projects. So it was a really nice, smooth process for us. It was probably one of the nicest Bali trips I've had in terms of ease of getting around to where we wanted to get to. And it was just overall, I came away with a very positive impression of the organization, the company and the individuals. We did get to see behind the scenes quite a bit. So that was really important, because you can see a facade, but what's underneath, and if you scratch the surface, what do you see? And all we saw was just genuine people, and that was lovely to get that exposure.
Rob, what about you? And I just want to mention here to everybody that Rob and Ian are both regular visitors to Bali. They've both been there on quite a number of occasions over many years. It was and I'm sorry to say this is in Australia, was my very, very first visit to Bali. So obviously the 3 of us went in with very different perspectives from a tourism point of view too, I guess. So Rob, if you want to, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I have been going to Bali a long time, as per Ian, and I'm very bullish on Bali as a tourist destination for Australians, and I think the future is very bright in that regard. So that's why we were open to this investment to start with. As Ian mentioned, very impressed with the team, clearly growing, and the explanations that they gave us over the 3 days as to why they're doing this and how the developers work and how the whole projects are structured gave me a lot more confidence that this is a solid investment that is worth definitely pursuing for investors. So I came away far more confident of offering this to investors going forward than I was.
which is obviously the intention of going there. So I'm very comfortable with it going forward.
What was your impression, Debbie?
Well, coming from a tourism background, but never having been to Bali, I definitely went in first and foremost knowing that the main reason they are doing these developments is, well, they're tourism developments. They're selling hotels and villas, hotel rooms. So I was very interested in where Bali's at in the tourism trade. I had the typical picture of Bali being a surfer's paradise, a backpacker place. And I thought, how on earth are they, got 5-star hotels that they're charging hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for a night? Well, that's not Bali. That's not the Bali I imagine. And it wasn't the Bali I imagined. It was very different. It was very sophisticated, very, very different to what I thought, and incredibly busy. Having said that, there were issues with I guess, that it was so busy. The infrastructure is not necessarily there yet that it needs to be to develop more tourism in the area. When I'm saying that, I mean the roads are crazy busy. I guess if anyone has been to Bali, they understand that. But there are things going in. There's is it a metro or a light rail?
Yeah, it's good. It's good that you brought that up. Absolutely, it's good that you brought that up because there's a new toll road going in. There's the underground railway. There's the links from the airport to Seminyak and Kuta, and then they're proposing another stage up to Ubud. So there's a lot coming. It probably won't be ready in the next couple of years,
But it's coming.
but over the next 5 years, it's coming. Absolutely.
And this really came back to the point that the Genet guys were making, is that the properties they're developing or that they're selling that are under development or going to development are in really prime locations where people don't need to even think about transport. They can get everything they want, do and see in walking distance of where they're staying.
That was the key as well. You touched on a really good point there. They were saying that if you're trying to get around the island or get around those busy places, which you typically would do if you were staying in, the backpacker location, and, you're having to go and find all these different places to go and eat or get facilities. If, on the other hand, you build something which is that 5-star location and everything is on site, from the luxury restaurant through to the best spas and bars and beach clubs, etc., you no longer are conscious of the traffic because it's irrelevant. It makes no difference to you. The only people that are traveling are locals and transportation like Grab or Gojek, because they're getting people's food from here, there, and everywhere. So you don't think about it after a while. I noticed, because of the fact that we were in one location and everything was there, I wandered around thinking, why would I ever leave? And that is a different kind of concept for people that have visited Bali before.
For sure.
And that's probably the big difference between the hotel 5-star locations that they've got versus doing smaller investments, which are common in Bali, because those villas tend to be in more outlying areas that might only be 5-10 Ks from the beach, but could be an hour away in the traffic.
Yeah, absolutely.
5-10 K, you don't.
So you just don't want that as a holiday. It would drive you insane.
Well, that's why they said that the Airbnb market and the occupation for the average villa in Bali was now on average about 47%, whereas they're saying that theirs are upwards from 80 to 95%. Because of that reason, and that they're not in prime locations. Anything outside of those prime locations is going to suffer right now. Even when they improve the transport, it's still not going to make them prime locations.
Yes, for sure. So going back to the tourism aspect, I think that was something else that I really wasn't that aware of. Obviously, Australia is the number one international tourist traveller to Indonesia and to Bali. Growing numbers of Americans, Europeans, Indians. There's a vast middle-class India now that has a very high disposable income, and they want to travel to wonderful exotic locations. The other thing that is probably something people don't really think about is the domestic tourism market in Indonesia. 270 million Indonesians, 8th largest economy in the world at this point. I believe it's going to be the 4th largest within 10 years. Again, a huge disposable income there for a lot of Indonesians, and a lot of them travel to Bali. So take away the international tourism trade, which is what happened in COVID. And they were still busy. They were still really busy there.
Didn't they say that 60% of the tourism in Bali was internal?
I believe something like that, yeah.
And that's why that was a question that was brought up on one of the webinars or one of the Zoom calls. And it was, well, what happens if there's another COVID? And actually, it was just interesting to hear them say it live that, when we were there. And they said, oh, look, these places were full. In the prime locations, they were full, and they were full of people that were local and Indonesians. So there wasn't a case of, all these empty, desolate properties. It was thriving and bustling. I remember somebody also talked about Canggu, and they said that it was as busy as it was prior to COVID locking everything down. It's just that it was busy with different people.
Yeah. So, yeah, really, really interesting. And Bali was quite an eye-opener for me in that way, which I guess leads us into the actual development. So when we were there, we spent a day driving around and looking at the upcoming development sites that they've got, 3 in particular. One of them was actually where Ian and I were staying, where the GNet guys put us up. It's a villa resort, which is quite dated now, Ian, right in the heart of Seminyak. Probably, 25 years old, I guess.
At least.
Definitely in need of major revamp, renovation. But what's happened is the developer has actually purchased the entire site, and I believe they're operating until February. Come March, they're going to raise the entire site and build hotel and villa complex on it. That's going to be one of the new developments. There was also a small little group of villas which are newer. They're going to just be doing a refurbishment of that. They were lovely. But the one that I think excited all of us was the Royal Beach redevelopment. Do you want to tell us about that?
Just driving up to the entrance of that, we went, where are we? And then when we saw just the opening of that facade and all the kind of greenery and trees, and then you start to imagine what it's going to look like if it was refurbished and brought up to that, modern day standard. And you start to get a feeling of, well, this is the level of clientele they're going to start to attract.
So it's a large 300-room hotel with a bunch of villas on a massive block of land right on the beach. Huge. So they're going to be just refurbishing, but like a major refurbishment. 18 months job.
Yeah, that's a big job.
Yep. And building some new ones in some of the areas as well. I think they're going to relocate the pools and everything. But yeah, the impressive thing about that site was where it was. You could literally just stay there. You're right on the beach in the middle of Seminyak and then just walk everywhere. You don't need to worry about the traffic.
Yeah, amazing.
So we are very bullish on that in particular.
Yeah, so that was really, really exciting to see that. The next day, the guys took us around to some of the finished or close to finished sites, or the ones that they've been actually selling. The Look, which was absolutely beautiful, unfortunately has just been sold out. So we're not going to be able to sell any of those
actually
villas.
They've said you've got a last dog's life. If you put an expression of interest in, if any of the ones that are currently under offer fall over, you might get a look in. And I would say if there's anybody that ends up having a look at this and speaks to us, we can at least get an expression of in.
Get you on the wait list.
Yeah, absolutely. Do that.
Yeah. So I think that was a phenomenal project, which we can talk a little bit more about in a moment. But the other one was the Baraban Luxury Lofts, which has also been 80% sold. It has gone under construction. They're still levelling the site. They've had to dig down there doing an underground car park, but they are ready to actually start going up now. That will be another, I think, was that another 18 months away or 15 months from memory?
Probably about that, maybe a bit less.
Yeah. So...
Yeah, I think it was 14 months. That's I remember them saying. Yeah.
Yeah. The developments there, one of the big advantages of this as well in comparison to Australia, for instance, is that the developments seem to go far quicker. There's less red tape.
And how many people did they say were on site? How many people did they say were on site at one time? Does anybody remember that number?
No, but I do remember that they literally work around the clock.
It was a lot.
140?
140 people on site at any one time. And we were all saying, yeah, but at night? And they say, no, they work through from up until 3 and then they start again at 7 or something.
So, yeah, nearly around the clock. So, yeah, that's why they can put these up so fast. But, they're not doing cheap and nasty. They are doing quality. So when we went to the Loop, we were showing through their display apartment, and it was jaw-dropping. It was stunning, was it not? And Ian, can you tell us a little bit more about your story at the Loop?
Yeah, look, obviously, having looked at the Loop online and seeing those villas, and then when I saw one of those videos where the couple had just purchased their fractional, their whole, I can't remember which one it was. Myself and my wife looked at that and went, "Oh, that one's the one to get if you're going to get one right now." And so then when we turned up there, and you start to see the colors, the position, the attention to detail, and then you go through that construction, you see how big the place is as well, but also what is adjoining it. That's when I started to get quite excited. And you have to hold yourself back because you want to look at it with some level of skepticism. But when we eventually got to the completed villa, which is a two-story property, just the finishings were just superb. It was better than any 5-star hotel room that you'd stay in, and everything was included. And just looking at the designs and then the aspect, you start to think you're selling a dream here. It's a dream holiday or a dream ownership. And I guess that was enough for me to say, I'd like a piece of this. So I was saying to Mark, "Oh, is there any left?" casually. And he was saying, "Well, yeah, there's a couple left." And he never pushed it. He never mentioned it again. And then later on, I said, "Look, I'd like one." And so we put the deposit down, and we've got a fraction of the Luke. I'm very happy about that.
I just want to put into perspective the property itself. This was you bought, I think, a 2-bedroom, didn't you? A fraction of a 2-bedroom. But the one we looked at was a 3-bedroom. I believe the entire villa itself was 1.4 million. So the 10% fraction started at 140,000.
Thereabouts, because it's done in US dollars. So it's kind of a conversion rate that varies on a daily basis.
Yeah. Okay. So of course, the Janet guys have all their marketing materials. And if you get this, you'll see that the estimated income they have based is very conservative. They've looked at a nightly rate of $1,500, which, yes, it seems a lot in Bali. But when they compare it to anything else that's out there similar in the market, they estimate it could go for $2,500 or upwards a night. And when you walk into this villa, you can see why it is worth that kind of money with the finishings, the layout, just what is provided on site. So we're talking really high end. We're talking really high incomes here. And I think that's what blew me away most about these.
Do you remember that it's the TUI Blue Group that runs the...
Absolutely.
So the TUI Blue Group, the group manager or the regional manager was saying, "Look, you've underestimated because we've sold these rooms out a year in advance. And if we've sold them a year in advance, it means the room rate will go up." And they said they think it will be double what was advertised. Now, whether that eventuates or not doesn't matter, but the fact that they're so confident about it, and they alone brought 156,000 people to Bali through their own networks. If they've now got a hotel with 14 villas and 108 rooms, that's going to be their first port of call. And that's what's happening with the partners that they're working with. They're saying to the likes of Flight Centre, if they're doing a development with Flight Centre who've going to manage other developments with them, where are they going to promote first? Where in all the malls around Australia, where are you going to see? You're going to see these developments being promoted up front and primary. And that's something that's really exciting for our investors as well.
Rob, do you want to talk more about those connections that they've got with TUI Blue and Flight Centre?
I was just going to say, and the returns that everything's based on that anyone interested will find out from us are 75% occupancy. It's currently in the low to mid-80s for most of Bali. And as Ian's mentioning, these particular developments with the high-end partners in like Flight Centre are likely to be in the low 90s. So therefore, the returns will be higher. And they're all associated with high-end international brands. which obviously it's a different world to what some of us might live in. But you had Gucci, you had a famous chef running the restaurant there.
A 3 Michelin star chef. Yeah.
Yeah, a famous chocolate company.
Yeah, chef to Frank Sinatra and various other people.
Yeah, which is why they charge these sort of returns, because the high-end market is far less sensitive to price than the average person.
So that's the quality of stuff we're talking about here. Can we talk maybe a little bit about the developers who are doing this and the financial? Because obviously anyone who's looking at investing into this is going to be concerned with the security of what they're buying into. Is it going to go ahead? What are these developers? What kind of DD are GNet doing in terms of who they're partnering with?
Yeah, my biggest concern with this whole process from the start was, what's the risk during the process before they're necessarily finished? Now, the one thing that Mark and the team mentioned that became very bullish for me was that we're dealing with developers with huge financial resources over in Indonesia, and there is no bank finance involved in these projects.
What did you say about the bank finance? Because you said, there was something you said that really caught me, and it was like, oh, wow, okay. You said something about bank finance being, if something went wrong, the banks are primary. They're going to get their money first.
Yeah, I've got a lot of experience in this area over the last 20 years dealing with developers and through the GFC and other issues, that whenever there's a problem in the property market, and there always will be, and there will be in the next 5-10 years, there'll be at some point where the property market has a problem. If these developments are funded first mortgage by banks, unfortunately, generally, the whole projects can go belly up very quickly, because all the banks are concerned about is getting their funds back. So any other investors coming in with their money after the banks are really on a hiding to nothing and could end up with nothing. Now, this isn't a risk with these projects, and that's why I'm now wildly bullish on it, and think that the risk factors are way lower than a lot of other similar developments in Australia, even, for instance.
Why do you think it's not a risk, though? Like, let's get that point out, because that was something that really blew my mind. Why is it no longer a risk? Because they're not looking for that.
Yeah, well, because there's no bank that can come in and call in the loan. So if we have a financial crisis like 2008 or like COVID in 2020, if you don't have a bank coming in to call in the loan, then you don't have a risk of the project collapsing. And if these developers are well funded, which Mark and the team mentioned they will be able to cushion any soft conditions for 6-12 months, because they're not under pressure from a financing point of view.
And I think they're not looking for investment either. They can actually fund these themselves. They're not requiring pre-sales or anything like that. And
they don't need us to put our money in to actually complete the project. They're not waiting for investors to pay a portion of it. They're doing this anyway.
The developer of the Beriban Lofts is Pertama Property. From memory, they owned like another, was it 30 sites throughout Seminyak and Canggu? Yeah.
They've been land banking, haven't they? They've got 300. Oh, God, what was it? What was the number?
It might have been 300, not 30. It was crazy.
There was a 300 in there. 300.
The number of properties they own. So they've got big money behind them. They don't need ours, but they are just building phenomenal. In fact, it was really interesting that with the Beriban Lofts, they'd sold, I guess, 50% of the project GNet had for Pertama. Yeah, and they had this beautiful design development, but Pertama themselves were looking at it and saying, you know what? I think we can make this better. And they redesigned everything. They've decided to go down, put a car park underneath, turn the ground floor car park into a bunch of studio units. So they increased it by another 64 units, I think, something like that. Totally redid the facade, made it far more sexy, didn't charge any more for the properties than they were already charging. So the current owners didn't have to pay any more for this far upgraded project that they'd already bought into. So that's the quality of developer that they're working with here. And they do turn away probably 90% of the developers that come to them with properties that they want GNet to help them market, because
they got a 32-point checklist. And I thought, you could just say 64 or you could say 25. But he was going through some of the details as to what they need to get through and how they need to understand the project. And when they're choosing who to work with, it's so important that you get that right, because obviously the investors are the ones that will pay the price at the end. And their parameters were, from what I could see, very, very sound parameters, things that we'd all want to know were in place. And this developer is an epitome of that.
So I guess we should just give a very brief overview again of the structure of this investment or these investments that GeoNet are putting forward for the Bali market. They've sold out, Luke. They're 80% sold on Barabal, but we know of 3 new projects that will be coming online pretty soon. How they structure it is, firstly, you can buy an entire unit, full price, own the entire apartment, villa, whatever it is, or you can buy a fractional of it. Some of them might be 25%, so 4 parts of a unit, or 10%, so 10 parts in a unit. As a fractional owner, do you want to explain more about how that works, Rob?
Well, the fractional, as you mentioned, means that obviously to make the chunks a bit lower and make it more palatable, at least initially, to dip your toe in the water, where these properties might be 4, 5, 800,000, $1 million. If you bought the whole lot, you can get in for as little as 60,000, for instance. So it's a great way to start, makes it more accessible for self-managed.
Yes, so it's definitely available.
Makes it more accessible for redrawing and refinancing your own property portfolio in Australia. And we will, in a future upcoming webinar, talk about how, from a strategy point of view, these investments can help you reduce debt and increase your returns, which is part of it other than just the investment themselves. So it is exciting in that regard.
And also the fact that if you're a fractional owner, you still have full ownership rights and the full, 10% or 25% of the income that the full owner would receive.
Yeah, correct. And it's all pooled, so that's one less risk. You're not getting a share of just one particular unit. It's the whole complex. Yeah, the other thing I do want to mention as well, we touched on the bank financing. On the other side of the coin, just GeoNet itself, which is our conduit for Bali and the marketer of the projects, and obviously do all the background due diligence on the developers themselves. The other added comfort is that GeoNet are currently getting an Australian financial services license as a company.
The AFSL, yeah.
Now, that's not specific to the property sale part, but it is specific to them as a company for the development side of the business that they're looking to raise funds for. But what it does give investors in the properties, it just gives them a little bit of comfort that GeoNet are coming under the purview and the guise of all the Australian regulators. So therefore, we'll have to do everything well and truly by the books and follow all the rules and regulations. So you're not dealing with a small fly-by-night developer that's going to take shortcuts. You're dealing with the equivalent of an Australian financial services company.
Absolutely.
So that really perked up my interest as well with my background, that gives an added layer of comfort for investors.
Yeah. So I have been speaking to a few people over the last week about this. And, the first question is, are they an Australian company? Absolutely. And just meeting the guys. They're your typical Aussie. They're just like us. They're honest. They're transparent. They are very much in this to do right by their investors. That really came across to us very strongly.
Just how they treat their staff as well. This is the thing. You can have your facade and you can have your sales veneer, but how you then work with your internal customers, i.e. your staff, that's going to give away your true character. And when we were talking to the people and we got the opportunity to speak to a few people that are not directly connected, but connected to the staff members after hours, we started to see how they really felt about GeoNet. And there's no way you can fake that. You would have to set something up to actually, that it wasn't happening. We got a very good insight as to what these people are like. And the way they talk about Chad and Mark, it's just that they're not even going out of their way to edify them. It's just naturally flowing in their conversation. The group is very cohesive and the people really get on well. And I think that was a good indicator of who we were dealing with as a company as well, because you can't hide that. And it's for us, for me in particular, they gave me a lot of comfort to understand what they really like. And they're very generous. And I think you can't be one thing in one area of your life and not in the other areas of your life. So the way they are behind the scenes is the way they are in front as well. So it's been very nice as an experience to go over there. And I really love the opportunity that we have had to be that filter for our investors and make sure that we're not putting our name to something. And Rob, I don't know about you, but I can't sell something unless I believe it, and I can't explain and approve of something unless I'm thoroughly on board myself. So it was a good exercise for me. What about you?
Correct. I'm exactly the same. And I'm very transparent with people can read me very easily. If I don't believe in something, I won't be able to hide that. So to be enthusiastic, I have to actually believe it's a good investment. And I think that this could be a very, very good investment.
Yeah, look, I think the thing we came away with, the three of us, was that these guys are doing the right thing by their investors, by their channel partners. They have an amazing product or series of products that they're putting out into the market that we really believe in, and we believe in them.
Did you get anything in a nutshell? Obviously, we went over there and we absorbed a lot of information over 3 or 4 days, and we got a lot. We've got a lot of data to look at as well. Rob, you mentioned something about the different strategies, and I've had a few conversations with people since I've been back that are interested in investing. What are the 3 main vehicles for people to get investing in Bali that you understand at the moment?
Okay, well, probably the number one that most people in Australia would immediately consider is being able to access equity in their existing property investments, whether it's their own home or an investment property, because as we know, you can't borrow money in Bali separately. So because the income can potentially be so high, 15 to 20%, and you're borrowing money at, let's say, 7%, you can use this strategy existing debt, which obviously can help reduce the risk and pay out the loan very quickly. Then the other big one going forward will be superannuation self-managed funds, particularly for the fractional, where you might have $500,000 to $1 million in your super fund and you're quite happy to put 50 to 100,000 to diversify into something like this. And then, of course, some people might just have available cash for $50,000 or $100,000 that they want to look to invest in something that returns a high yield.
What I've noticed in speaking to people briefly is the people that were looking at some of the other high yield opportunities that we have presented over the last 3 or 4 years, if that was too high a barrier, this actually has a very accessible entry point into investing in something that's going to give them a return. And the other cherry on the cake is the fact that rather than having that holding cost where you're paying out your money and you're waiting for the development to complete and you're paying your interest on your loan, but obviously if you're releasing equity or you've got an opportunity cost if you're using cash, in this instance, we're getting an 8% per year paid on the deposit or the fraction that we've paid. And that's coming back to us every quarter. So
And during construction.
I mean, it blew me away. I was thinking, what? So they're paying us 8% for the money. And obviously that's a very cheap construction cost for them. But for us, that's such a bonus. You're not going into a negative while you're waiting for that property to be built. And so all of those things together came together in our minds, and we came away with a very positive impression.
Yeah. And the other thing that really stood out to me over the 3 days, and again, you can't fake that, is that all of the guys, Mark, Chad, absolutely love Bali. And they've got no intention, from what they said, of ever coming back to Australia. They see that as their permanent home. So that was infectious. That was making, I think, you and I think, well, I wouldn't mind spending quite a few months of the year over here as well with this.
Once you've got a foot in the door, it makes it much more feasible. That's the other thing we haven't touched upon. If you do have a fraction or an ownership of a property, automatically you get a number of days, up to a maximum of 21 days, in that 5-star accommodation every year. Obviously, it's up to a maximum of 21, but you'll have a proportion of that based on how much you've invested.
But also, if you own an entire unit, you can take it out of the property pool and live in it.
Yes.
Yeah, you can retire in it down the track. You could do all sorts.
As long as, that was the other thing they mentioned, if you're buying it via your SMSF, obviously it's got to be at arm's length. And but once you go into your retirement phase, you can actually live in that property. It's no longer deemed as needing to make an income for the SMSF. You are able to choose to live in that property. I don't know why you would. I think you'd still rent it out and probably locate yourself somewhere else, maybe not quite as 5-star living, but it would certainly make sense to keep that property as an investment.
Yeah, but I believe that they do have some of their buyers who have bought two. One as an investment, one to live in.
To have that spare cash.
Yeah. Look, I guess I don't want to sort of talk too much about the nitty-gritty details today. This was really just to give everybody listening a bit of an insight into, what we learned and why we are so confident and excited about this project. We have now met the guys, met the team, been behind the scenes, been through their office, met their staff, seen the projects, and really we understand how it works and why it works as well as it does. So if you do want to know more information, there is going to be a webinar that GNet are holding 6:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the 18th of September. If you are on our database, you most likely did receive an email. There'll be a few more going out over the next week and a half before that event. So if you do wish to tune into that webinar, please reply to that email or just reach out to us and we can register you for that. And you'll get a really good overview of exactly how it works and the properties that they've got for sale. So it'll be nice and visual, all pretty pictures of what they look like and what Bali's like at the moment. It will definitely be worth, investigating, I think, if this is of any kind of interest to you. So have you got any last words for us, Ian and Rob?
No, just look forward to the webinar and then speaking to any investors who want to find out more. We'll happily help them with it.
The weather was fantastic when we were over there, and the people are great, and the investment opportunities, they're very, very accessible to Australians. And there's a level of confidence that you get from this type of investment that surprisingly might be more confident you get from some of the Australian offerings that there is in and around Australia. So definitely overcome your skepticism and at least ask the questions. I think that's the key to this. For many of us who are not originally from Australia, it's a little bit easier to get your head around investing in another country, but their legal jurisdiction is very solid, and they are a very well-developed nation, and they're following the rule of law. And I would say that I feel very confident about their investment arena now and moving forward.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that wraps up. There's lots more we could talk about, but we won't today. I'm sure that we'll be doing some more episodes in the future on this Bali investment property concept and idea as we get more into it. But yeah, so in the description of this episode, we will just put in a bit more information about the Bali investment. And of course, do get in contact with us if you want to register for that webinar. We'd love to see you on it and look forward to talking more about this in the future. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Ian. Great.
Thank you. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.